The autumn rain drummed steadily against the windshield as Detective Marcus Thompson pulled into the parking lot of West Valley Shopping Center. It was nearly 9 p.m., and the fluorescent lights of the grocery store cast long shadows across the wet asphalt. Marcus had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift, investigating a string of burglaries in the upscale Riverside district, and all he wanted was to grab some essentials and head home to his apartment. He stepped out of his unmarked police cruiser. Marcus noticed a young black man in his early 20s walking briskly across the parking lot, a dark hoodie pulled up against the rain. The man carried a large duffel bag slung over his shoulder and kept glancing around nervously. Something about the scene triggered Marcus's instincts, or perhaps his biases. Marcus had been a detective for 8 years, working his way up from beat cop in one of Denver's toughest precincts. His track record was solid, his arrest numbers impressive, but his methods had always been aggressive. He believed in trusting his gut, and right now, his gut was telling him this young man was trouble. The detective changed course, abandoning his grocery mission to follow the suspect. He watched as the man approached a late-model BMW parked under a dim streetlight. The contrast struck Marcus immediately. Expensive car, suspicious behavior, wrong neighborhood. In his experience, that combination usually meant one thing: stolen vehicle. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, his hand instinctively moving to his badge. "NYPD. Can I have a word with you?" The young man turned, his face showing surprise rather than fear. Under the streetlight, Marcus could see he was wearing designer sneakers beneath his hoodie, but these details didn't register. Marcus had already made his assessment. "Is there a problem, officer?" the young man asked, his voice calm and articulate. "Detective," Marcus corrected curtly. "I need to see some identification. May I ask why?" The question irritated Marcus. In his world, compliance came first, questions later. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. Vehicle thefts, break-ins. You match a description." The young man's eyebrows raised slightly. What description would that be? Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by someone he viewed as a suspect. "Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I just need to see your ID and verify this is your vehicle." "Of course," the young man replied, reaching slowly into his pocket. "I'm going to get my wallet now." As he handed over his driver's license, Marcus noticed the young man's movements were deliberate and careful, the actions of someone who understood how quickly these situations could escalate. The license read, David Mitchell Chen, age 24. With an address in the affluent Highlands neighborhood, Marcus studied the license, then looked back at the BMW. "This your car?" "Yes, sir. You live in Highlands?" "I do." "Kinda far from home, aren't you?" Marcus asked, though the shopping center was only 15 minutes from the listed address. David remained patient. "I preferred this grocery store. To have a better selection of organic produce." The answer struck Marcus as pretentious, reinforcing his suspicions. "What's in the bag?" "Gym clothes. I just finished working out at the fitness center across the street." Marcus gestured toward the duffel bag. "Mind if I take a look?" For the first time, David hesitated. "Do you have a warrant?" "I don't need a warrant for a consensual search, unless you've got something to hide." The implication hung in the air. David sighed softly and unzipped the bag, revealing workout clothes, sneakers, and a protein shake. Marcus rifled through the contents, his frustration growing as he found nothing incriminating. "You seem to know a lot about your rights," Marcus observed, his tone accusatory. "I believe everyone should know their rights," David replied evenly. "Yeah, you study law or something." "Something like that." The vague response annoyed Marcus further. He was accustomed to intimidating suspects into submission, but David's calm demeanor was throwing him off balance. Every question was met with politeness but not the deference Marcus expected. "Turn around and put your hands on the car," Marcus commanded. "Am I under arrest?" "I'm conducting an investigation." "Turn around," David complied, placing his palms flat against the BMW's hood. The rain continued to fall, soaking through both their clothes as Marcus conducted a pat. He found nothing. No weapons, no drugs, no evidence of any wrongdoing. "You're clean," Marcus muttered, stepping back. "I would hope so," David replied, turning to face him. "Detective, may I ask what specific crime you suspect me of committing?" The question was reasonable, but it felt like a challenge to Marcus. "I'm investigating reports of suspicious activity. You were acting nervous, carrying a large bag, looking around like you were casing the area." "I was looking around because it's raining and I was trying to get to my car quickly," David explained. "As for the bag, I just showed you it contains gym equipment." Marcus felt his control of the situation slipping. He'd been certain this would be a quick arrest, another successful gut instinct that would look good on his monthly report. Instead, he was standing in the rain, questioning a polite young man who seemed to have every right to be exactly where he was. "Where do you work?" Marcus asked, fishing for something, anything, that would justify his suspicions. "I'm employed by the city," David answered. "Doing what?" David reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, handing it to Marcus. As the detective read it, his face went pale. David Mitchell Chun, Inspector General's Office, Internal Investigations Divisions of Denver. Marcus stared at the card, then back at David, his mouth slightly agape. The Inspector General's office was the independent agency responsible for investigating misconduct within all city departments, including the police department. You single quotes re ... Marcus began, but the words caught in his throat. I'm the person who reviews cases of police misconduct, David said quietly. I investigate officers who abuse their authority, violate citizens' rights, or bring dishonor to the badge. The color drained from Marcus's face completely. For 8 years, he'd heard whispers about the Inspector General's office, the internal watchdog that could end careers with a single report. He'd never imagined he'd find himself face to face with one of their investigators. Especially not under these circumstances. I was just doing my job, Marcus stammered. Were you? David asked, his tone remaining professional but pointed. Because, from where I stand, this looks like harassment based on racial profiling. You had no reasonable suspicion, no articulable facts to justify this stop, and no evidence to support your accusations. Marcus's training kicked in, but it was too late for damage control. I had reports of suspicious activity ... What reports? David interrupted gently. Who called them in? What was the nature of the complaint? What specific criminal activity was reported? Each question hit like a hammer blow. Marcus realized he had no good answers because there had been no reports. His stop had been based entirely on his own prejudices and assumptions. Marcus faltered. You saw a young black man with a duffel bag near an expensive car and assumed he was a criminal, David said, completing the thought Marcus couldn't voice. You didn't consider that he might be the car's owner, that he might have every right to be here, or that your assumptions might be wrong. The rain had intensified, but neither man moved to seek shelter. This conversation needed to happen, regardless of the weather. Detective Thompson, David continued, reading the name tag on Marcus's uniform. How many stops like this have you made? How many young men of color have you approached with the same assumptions? Marcus couldn't answer. The truth was too damning. Here's what's going to happen, David said, his voice taking on an official tone. You're going to write a report about this incident. You're going to be completely honest about your reasons for the stop, your actions, and your findings, and then you're going to submit it to your supervisor. And if I don't? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Then I'll write my own report, David replied. And I can assure you, mine will be far more detailed and far more damaging to your career. Marcus felt his legs go weak. 8 years of building his reputation, his track record, his future, all of it could disappear because of this one encounter. But here's the thing, David continued, his tone softening slightly. I don't want to end your career. I want to save it. Marcus looked up, surprised. You're not the first officer I've encountered like this, and you won't be the last. The department has a problem, a culture that rewards aggressive policing without considering the constitutional rights of citizens. But that culture can change, and it starts with officers like you recognizing the problem and becoming part of the solution. David reached into his pocket and pulled out another business card. This is for the department's bias awareness training program. It's voluntary right now, but I suspect that's going to change soon. I strongly recommend you enroll. Marcus took the card with trembling hands. I'm going to be watching your record, Detective Thompson, David said as he opened his car door. Every stop, every arrest, every interaction with the public. If I see patterns of bias or misconduct, we'll have another conversation, one that won't be as friendly as this one. As David started his engine, he rolled down the window. And detective, next time you want to profile someone, remember that you never know who you're talking to. That young man in the hoodie might be a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, or even someone whose job it is to hold you accountable. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of what they look like or where you encounter them. With that, David drove away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the rain, his worldview shattered and his future uncertain. The following morning, Marcus sat at his desk staring at a blank incident report form. Every attempt to justify his actions looked worse on paper than it had felt in the moment. He realized that David had been right. There had been no real suspicious activity, no valid reason for the stop, nothing but his own biases and assumptions. For the first time in his career, Marcus questioned everything. How many innocent people had he harassed? How many lives had he disrupted based on prejudice rather than evidence? The weight of these realizations was crushing. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Sergeant Rodriguez, his supervisor, entered with a concerned expression. Thompson, I just got a call from the Inspector General's office. They're requesting your incident reports from the past 6 months. Want to tell me what's going on? Marcus's heart sank. David hadn't been bluffing. He really was conducting a broader investigation. Sarge, I think I made a mistake last night, Marcus began, and for the next hour he told Rodriguez everything about the parking lot encounter. To his surprise, Rodriguez didn't explode with anger. Instead, he looked tired, almost defeated. Marcus, this is the third inquiry we've had this year about officers in our unit. The department's under federal review for patterns of discriminatory policing. If the Inspector General finds systematic bias in our division, heads are going to roll, starting with mine. The conversation that followed was the most honest Marcus had ever had with his supervisor. Rodriguez revealed that he'd been fielding complaints for months, trying to protect his officers while simultaneously trying to change a culture that rewarded the wrong behaviors. The old ways aren't working anymore, Rodriguez admitted. Community trust is at an all-time low, and frankly, some of it's deserved. We need officers who can police with their brains, not just their biases. Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into training with an intensity that surprised his colleagues. He enrolled in the bias awareness program David had recommended, attended community forums to better understand civilian perspectives, and began studying constitutional law in his spare time. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy. Years of ingrained thinking patterns don't disappear overnight. But gradually, Marcus began to see his job differently. Instead of viewing every encounter as US versus them, he started seeing his role as guardian and protector of all citizens, regardless of their background. 3 months after the parking lot incident, Marcus was patrolling when he received a call about suspicious activity at another shopping center. The description was eerily familiar. A young man of color with a bag, acting nervous near expensive cars. But this time, Marcus approached differently. "Good evening," he said politely as he approached the young man. "I'm Detective Thompson with Denver PD. We received a call about some concerns in this area. Is everything okay?" The young man, barely 18, looked terrified. "I was just waiting for my mum. She's shopping inside." Marcus noticed the teenager's hands shaking, his eyes darting nervously toward the police cruiser. This was fear, not guilt. "What's your name, son?" "Jerome." "Jerome Washington." "Well, Jerome, you're not in any trouble, but you seem upset. Is there something I can help you with?" It took several minutes of gentle conversation, but eventually Jerome opened up. He'd been waiting for over an hour for his mother to finish grocery shopping, and when he saw the police car, he panicked. His older brother had been arrested the previous year in a case of mistaken identity, and Jerome was terrified of having any interaction with police. Marcus spent 20 minutes with Jerome, explaining his rights, discussing the proper procedures for police encounters, and even sharing some of his own experiences with bias and prejudice. When Jerome's mother emerged from the store, she found her son laughing at one of Marcus's stories about his early days as a rookie officer. "Thank you," she said quietly to Marcus as they prepared to leave. "Jerome's been afraid of police ever since his brother's arrest. You've shown him that not all officers are the same." As Marcus drove away from that encounter, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine pride in his work. He'd made a real difference in that young man's life, building trust instead of destroying it, creating connection instead of division. 6 months after the parking lot incident, Marcus received an unexpected phone call. "Detective Thompson, this is David Chen from the Inspector General's office. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Marcus's heart rate spiked, but he agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. When he arrived, David was already waiting, looking as composed and professional as he had that rainy night months earlier. "I've been reviewing your recent activity reports," David began without preamble. "Your approach to community policing has changed dramatically. I'm curious about what prompted that transformation." Marcus chose his words carefully. "I had an encounter that made me question my methods and my motivations. It forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my own biases." David smiled. "Slightly, I'm aware of that encounter. I was there, remember? You've been watching me all this time." "It's my job," David replied, "but I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to offer you an opportunity." David explained that the police department was launching a new community relations initiative designed to rebuild trust between officers and the citizens they served. The program needed experienced detectives who understood both sides of the equation, officers who had made mistakes but learned from them. "You're not the same person who stopped me in that parking lot," David observed. "You've done the work to change, to grow, to become the kind of officer the community needs. I'd like you to help train other officers to make that same transformation." Marcus was stunned. "You want me to train other cops after what I did?" "Especially because of what you did," David corrected. "You understand how easy it is to fall into patterns of bias and prejudice. More importantly, you understand how to change. That makes you uniquely qualified to help others do the same." The training program launched 3 months later, with Marcus as one of its lead instructors. He shared his story openly: the parking lot encounter, his awakening, his journey toward becoming a better officer. Some of his colleagues were skeptical at first, but his authenticity and passion gradually won them over. The program's impact was measurable. Complaint rates dropped, community trust improved, and officer satisfaction increased as they found more meaning in their work beyond just making arrests. 1 year after that fateful rainy night, Marcus stood before a group of rookie officers, telling his story once again. But this time, he wasn't alone on the stage. "I'd like you to meet David Chen," Marcus said, gesturing to his former adversary. "He's the man whose life I disrupted based on nothing more than my own prejudices and assumptions. He's also the man who saved my career by helping me become a better officer and a better person. David stepped forward, addressing the recruits with the same calm professionalism Marcus remembered from their first encounter. Detective Thompson's story is important because it demonstrates that change is possible, David said. We all have biases, it's part of being human. The question is whether we acknowledge those biases and work to overcome them, or whether we let them define our actions and damage our communities. After the presentation, David and Marcus walked out of the academy together, their professional relationship having evolved into something resembling friendship. Do you ever regret stopping me that night? David asked as they reached the parking lot. Marcus considered the question carefully. I regret my motivations and my assumptions, he said finally. But I don't regret that it happened. That encounter changed my life, my career, and hopefully the lives of the officers I train now. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. David nodded, understanding. Just remember, for every officer like you who learns and grows, there are others who don't. My job isn't finished, and neither is yours. As they parted ways, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. A simple trip to the grocery store had nearly ended his career, but it had also given him a new purpose. He was no longer just a detective making arrests, he was a guardian of justice, working to ensure that the badge he wore represented the best of law enforcement rather than its worst impulses. The rain had stopped months ago, but the lessons from that night continued to ripple outward, changing not just Marcus but everyone he encountered. Sometimes transformation begins with a single moment of reckoning, a confrontation with our own prejudices that forces us to choose between remaining who we are or becoming who we could be. Marcus had made his choice, and in doing so he'd discovered that the badge he'd worn for 8 years carried a weight and responsibility he'd never fully understood. Now he did, and he was determined to help others understand it too. The story didn't end in that parking lot, it began there. And it continues every day, in every encounter, with every choice to see the humanity in others rather than the stereotypes we carry in our minds. Justice isn't just about catching criminals or solving cases. It's about treating every person with dignity, respect, and fairness, regardless of who they are or where we encounter them. That's the badge Marcus believes in now, and that's the badge he's helping to build for the future. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Real change begins with honest conversations about difficult topics. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge us to be better, to think deeper, and to treat each other with the respect we all deserve.